Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to our second session of our CropCon 2022. I love that name, Elriza. My name is Nomfundo Mfeka. I'll be facilitating this session today. We're going to have some live presentations today. We're also going to have a pre-recorded presentation from one of our panelists who's coming from virtually. So just to introduce our panelists, we are going to have Elriza today, who is the Marketing and Communications Manager for CropLife. She's going to be taking us through a topic called Industry Knowledge Transfer Resources, and I think that's based on the first session, I think this is a great topic to have now. And then we will have Chana-Lee, who is the Agri-Intel manager. She's going to be taking us through the Agri-Intel developments that have come through. So that's also going to be quite interesting, Chana-Lee. And then we have good old Gerhard Verdoorn, who is the Operations and Stewardship Manager for CropLife SA. He will take us through a topic called Working Group Success Stories for Small Packs. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, Gerhard. And then we will have virtually Kerrin, who is the Agricultural Liability Loss Adjuster. So he will be taking us through a topic that I think is going to be really interesting called Where Does the Responsibility Buck Stop? And I'm expecting quite a bit of a debate during that session. And then, of course, we have Gerrit Bezuidenhout, who is a multi-award-winning journalist. We're really glad to have you, and he'll be taking us through a topic called Responsible Journalism in the Agricultural Sector. So welcome to our panelists today. Just to explain, it's going to be a bit different from the first session. We will have a presentation. After each presentation, then we'll have a Q&A session. So we will open the questions up to the floor, as well as to our virtual audience after each presentation. All right. So to take us off, I would like to present Elriza to start us off with the first topic. Thank you, Elriza.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think I'll start off with answering a question that I'm sure everyone wants to know the answer to, and the answer is yes. Chana-Lee and I did coordinate our wardrobes today. Right. So I'm quite excited to talk about today pretty much everything I keep myself busy with on a day-to-day basis and which I'm quite passionate about. And the previous session touched on a bunch of these issues already, but from different angles. So I'm probably going to show you now what we're doing from CropLife's side. So I thought I'd give you an update just about 3 of the major areas that CropLife South Africa drives in order to ensure that knowledge and resources in the industry is disseminated and shared with those who need to know. Right. So I'll start off with marketing. In 2021, CropLife South Africa published 29 digital articles, 32 print articles, and participated in 20 television interviews and 32 radio interviews. Now, perhaps this may not sound like a lot, but if you break it down monthly, it becomes quite a bit. I'm not showing these numbers to show how great we are at marketing, because we don't sell products. We're a non-profit. We're not in the game of chasing profits. All these efforts are aimed at education and information to do the right thing. And they are made possible because we have great industry and media partners like Grain SA, like Plus Media, who understand the importance of getting the information to the people who need to know it. And in South Africa, we are very blessed with the level of expertise of our agricultural journalists who don't necessarily chase any sensational story, but who, in most cases, do their best to get the technical information and the context right. Unfortunately, that doesn't always taper down to the general media, and Gerrit will go into responsible journalism a bit later. My colleagues have seen how my blood pressure goes up sometimes when I hear the name of a certain prominent and quite respected consumer publication who always refers to us as lobbyists. I always get my back up because we don't lobby. Okay. And I always think to myself, if only they actually took some time to see what it is that we do, the education, the training, the sharing of information, all in the name of stewardship. And we create resources that can be used by our members or the public for whatever purpose they see fit. In 2021, CropLife SA created 30 videos, 14 information infographics or posters, and 4 newsletters, We also created a summary document to make it easy for our members to access the information based on whichever topic they feel they need to address, from container management to resistance management, you name it. So then, if I really have to think about it, perhaps we do lobby. We lobby for people to be responsible, to educate themselves, and to do the right thing. Julia and Laurie mentioned yesterday that a better word is advocacy, which coincidentally is the theme of the session. But that's what we do, and we will continue to do that, to ensure that our industry continues to give access not just to safe and nutritious food, but enough food. And you can only do that if you protect the food. So, that's what we're doing for the people out there. But we also have a big focus in the industry itself to ensure that those who recommend and sell these crop protection solutions remain up to date and develop themselves professionally. Which is why we drive the CropLife SA Continuous Professional Development, or CPD program, mentioned in the previous session. Now, the CPD program can be compared to cats. You either love it, or you hate it, or you tolerate it because someone brought it home and now you can't get rid of it. And, of course, there are bound to be a couple of hairballs. And with the CPD moving to a new platform in the current cycle, it's not just 1 or 2 hairballs. Right? But this is just what happens when you have over 1,000 crop advisors from 36 companies learning to master new technology. Just because there are a few hiccups, it doesn't mean we throw the cat out with the bathwater. Some of the functionalities of the new system include real-time view of crop advisors' progress from both the facilitator and the crop advisor side, so they can manage their time, take responsibility, and ensure they get the required points throughout the year. Another feature is the digital cards, so we'll no longer be printing cards, but those who are compliant will receive their cards immediately once the cycle has come to an end. Before the card is distributed, though, the crop advisor will need to agree to abide by the CropLife SA Code of Conduct, and to only recommend and sell products that are registered in accordance with Act 36 of 1947. So, we will continue to make these improvements because we share your frustrations. Remember, all your frustrations come down on us, so trust me when I say that making the process as seamless as possible is a top priority for me. But it can't be watered down, it must mean something, it must have a certain standard. So in CropLife, a major focus is to create resources and training sessions of a certain standard. The online modules created in-house so far that can give a crop advisor the following points. For Category 1, 10 quizzes equating to 48 points in total. Category 2, 1 quiz equating 20 points. Category 3, 6 quizzes equating to 80 points in total. In addition, and this will certainly increase now that we're approaching the end of the cycle, our members have submitted 619 training instances that qualify for points. Something to remember though, when it comes to CPD, there is a difference between doing your job and going further and learning, upskilling, and developing yourself to do your job to the best of your ability. This is the difference between just doing what is necessary and doing the right thing, which is often going above and beyond just what's expected. The last area I'll discuss is training. I touched on some of the training that we offer to the crop advisors as part of the CPD program. And one of these modules is the Responsible Use module by Gerhard, which is basically a train-the-trainer module. So the idea is to give our members and crop advisors the resources to pass on to the clients and the farm workers who are working with their products on farm level. And Gerhard mentioned how many people have been trained with this module yesterday, and the number is not insignificant. And then, of course, we have the basic crop protection course, which will now also be hosted on a new platform. My colleague Nadia is now busy testing it, and we're in the final testing stages as we speak, and we are aiming to launch the new system in the next couple of days. Some of the new functionalities will include the ability to register at any time throughout the year and completing the course at your own pace, providing that it's within a 12-month period. We've also added 3 new modules to the IPN section to introduce biotechnology as a crop protection tool, and we are aiming to review and revise all the material to ensure the students are up to date with the latest information pertaining to the crop protection industry. So, in conclusion, while it may not always be that obvious to everyone, advocacy and knowledge sharing is a major part of our focus. And these are just some of the ways in which CropLife South Africa is working not only to ensure that the necessary resources are created to begin with, but also that it reaches the intended audience that needs it the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Elriza, for that informative presentation. It's really great to see all the work that CropLife is putting in to really transfer the knowledge. You touched on, I'll start and then I'll pass it on to the floor. You touched on 3 major areas, I know, on CPD, on training, and of course on the marketing that you guys have been doing as CropLife. And you made a comment of, we are not a lobbying group. Which I like, because my first question to you then is, as a communications and marketing manager of CropLife, for instance, last year there were a number of articles that came out about the crop industry, about CropLife SA in South Africa. For instance, I'll be specific. There was one from the Mail and Guardian that came out in May that I will read specifically, which talked about a wall of silence, where CropLife SA was referred to as a lobby group of pesticides in South Africa and a group that was not willing to share information with other stakeholders, referring to our Agri-Intel database. So my question to you on that is, based on what you've said today, is how does CropLife communicate with these secondary regulators? You know, how does CropLife try and influence these narratives that come out from these stakeholders? As the communications manager, how do you manage that?
Good question. Look, it is difficult, and it takes some doing not to take it personally, because as I said, we know what we do. We know the good we do and the effort we actually put into doing the right thing. On that particular instance, it was quite interesting because we actually shared our stance with the journalists, and it was pretty much ignored, which is unfortunate. It does happen. Sometimes I get the feeling they only approach us so that they can say they've done their due diligence, and they already have the agenda in their mind. So then sometimes it becomes a losing battle, and it is what it is. But this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And as long as we as an industry carry on doing the right thing and we start sharing those stories and telling people, we've been silent quite long, we've been sort of reactive. It's time to become proactive. It's time for us to go first. Guys, this is what we're doing. We're not just selling product. We are training, we are educating, we are going the extra mile. And I don't think that's something we've done enough. So that's my comment. The time is now to really not just CropLife. CropLife is doing it. That is our marketing strategy. It's a major focus for us. Our members need to do it as well. I think they need to hop on board and include it in their marketing strategies and their con strategies and really get that message out there.
I think that's a good point. And I'd actually like to call in Gerrit in here, because you are an agricultural journalist. And I would really like to get your input on that, on how can CropLife sort of control or get in front of these types of narratives and perceptions that come out about our industry. So it'd be really interesting to get your point of view on this.
I think the opportunities to bring your message across and to communicate your point of view has grown so vastly over the past, say, half a decade. I mean, in the past we were limited to basically print, and now, I mean, the whole world is your stage. I think with Elriza saying the time to be proactive is now, and I think in terms of CropLife, I think that the platforms should all be embraced. Social media, print. I mean, we are sitting here, we're talking to the whole world. And if you grab those opportunities and you come as yourself and you bring your own a message, and you don't just rely on, say, a second or a third party to disseminate it, your message will become so much clearer, and you can speak directly to the targets that you're aiming for.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Rob, do you want to come in?
Nomfundo, please. I would just like to comment on Agri-Intel. Agri-Intel is a wholly owned piece of proprietary information that belongs to CropLife South Africa. It was started off as an MRL tool for export farmers, and it has evolved and grown over the years. It costs a significant amount of money to develop. It costs an even more significant amount of money to keep it going. It's actually the mandate of government to keep a register of every product that is registered under Act 36. The onus and responsibility should not sit on on the industry.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have developed this database for the benefit of our members, all of our members have got free access because they pay membership fees. So the subscription fee for non-members is only fair. We've got journalists in the room. I mean, there's well-known periodicals these days. You pay to access them, even if you go in online. So we have no apology for charging for access to our database for non-members because it costs a lot of money to develop, to maintain, and to pay salaries of our staff. So if people have a problem, I think they should direct it to government and say, why do you not have a publicly accessible database of products registered, rather than giving us grief?
Thank you, Rod. I think that's very clear. I'll pass it on to the floor if we have any questions for Elriza or virtually. Or I'll move on to my next question. Gerrit? Yes, sorry.
May I add a bit of a comment and observation on what Elriza spoke about now and call it the lobby part of the media. I'm not talking about the hardcore, honest and agricultural media, but the lobby media published some articles about CropLife that were quite scathing in the last 2 years. Despite us being proactive and giving the right information, they don't listen to that. So it seems to be bad for CropLife SA. Let me put it into context. We've done, if I say us, actually Elriza is the conduit for all our communication. We've done communication about certain issues. And take just for example, those topics in the public arena that carry momentum versus the topics in the public arena that don't carry momentum. Those lobby articles have a very limited lifespan. They've got a very small audience that read that particular stuff in Constantia in the Western Cape. That's all they read it. The mainline media that we spoke about, the locust outbreak, the tuta absoluta, the potato tuber moth, that stuff has a momentum that is still carrying on, despite us putting the first media out there 2 years from now. So maybe we are a bit oversensitive, I think, and even myself, I take it very personally when they write rubbish about us. But we take it too personal because that media outlet or that particular media event has a very short lifespan, whereas the main core stuff that we broadcast out to farmers about our training, responsible use, pest outbreaks, how to combat it, has a long-term lifespan. So despite the negative stuff, I think we should put it into context and be a bit more calm about this. And saying to my dear colleagues, let's not get overstressed. I know we stress, but let's not stress too much about it.
Thanks for that, Gerrit. Right, Elriza, I know you shared a bit on the CPD and the basic course training, which I think I'd like to congratulate CropLife on getting that on a new platform. I think that's really going to be great and allow a lot of people to be involved and take up that training. So I think my question for you on that is, we had in the earlier session, I think it's Gideon, if I'm not mistaken, he spoke about being a responsible crop advisor. And when I saw you talking about CPD, which is aimed at crop advisors, now I wanted to ask, in that course, are you guys sort of touching on something like that, on responsibility, on what exactly are you touching about on that course, specifically for the crop advisors? Because it seems there's a huge trend of wanting them to be more responsible and to be more technical. Just give a bit more information on what the course involves.
Right, so there's two issues here. There's the CPD and the basic crop protection course. And I know a lot of people get very confused between the two. They think they do the basic crop protection course, now they're CropLife accredited. It doesn't work that way. So the basic crop protection course is the minimum requirement for a crop advisor to be able to participate in the CPD program. You can only participate in the CPD program if you are a crop advisor of a distributor member company of CropLife South Africa. So the basic crop protection course can be done by anyone. Anyone with an interest, it doesn't matter, you can be fresh out of varsity or fresh out of high school or whatever, as long as you have internet access and you can read, it's fine. But that course consists of 4 modules, right? The first 2 touch on technical things, plant structure and pests and pest structures, and it's very technical. The last 2 is very much aimed at responsibility. It touches on everything to do with the legal requirements. IPM is the 4th module, I mentioned that, and then you have everything covering from IPM. So half the course is purely about doing the right thing and
Yes.
responsibility. I hope that answers your question. In the CPD, sorry, just to
Yes.
add to that, in the CPD itself
Yes.
as well, the entire category 3 is aimed at stewardship.
Yeah.
So that focuses completely on anything from responsible use, from warehousing, storage, transport,
Yes.
all those topics.
Okay, that's
So they do the course and then they do the category
Yes.
3 yearly. Every year they need to get those points.
Okay, I think that's really good. And then just to add on that, there was a question from Marius earlier where he was asking, do farmers know about CBD course? I will ask you that, do they know, and what is CropLife doing to try and make them more aware for their crop advisors or farmers as well?
Right, so a lot of the citrus producers and the export guys, they pretty much know because a lot of them need to comply with global gap. So there we don't have a lot of problems. I think it's more the grain guys sometimes, but that's why we have these excellent relationships with Grain SA. So there have been numerous articles in Grain SA where we have touched on it and why do you need to check who you're buying your agrochemicals from. And we're promoting it in that way. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. If they missed that particular article, they might not necessarily know, but I know Corné and his team puts a focus on their members and getting that message across. So we are doing it. We rely on our partners to assist us on that because we don't always speak directly to the farmer, but we do reach out to our partners who do.
Okay, thank you. Okay. No other questions on the floor? No. I think not. Okay. Thank you so much, Elriza. That was really, really informative. And I really want to say we do recognize the amount of work that you do. As Gerrit always tells me, Elriza is very busy. So I really, really recognize that. And as CropLife, and I think as industry members, we appreciate that. So thank you. All right, we will then move on to our next presentation, which will be by Chana-Lee. She will just be giving us a bit of developments on the Agri-Intel database. Over to you, Chana-Lee.
Thank you very much. Yes, so this morning I'm just going to touch very quickly on 2 developments on the Agri-Intel website. The first one is the training videos, which Elriza has been working very hard on over the last few months as well. And also I'll be launching a new feature, which we probably launched about an hour ago on the website. So it's going to be hot off the press. So looking at the training videos, everyone is aware of the Agri-Intel website, I'm hoping. And for those of you that have not yet registered on the website, all you need to do is click on the register button on the homepage, follow the prompts, and you'll be registered from there. Those of you that have registered are probably receiving renewal emails. Remember, access to Agri-Intel is on an annual basis, so you do need to renew your profile. So if you're not able to log into the website, please just log on to Agri-Intel under the user profile and renew your membership there for the following year to access the information. Once you've logged onto the website and able to access it, underneath the industry resources and training section of the website, we have a page which looks like this, where there are a variety of documents available for your perusal. The first one, which might be of use, is the Agri-Intel user guideline. And if we scroll further down the website, we've got the training videos available to you. These are available 24/7, and they've been divided into 9 different videos highlighting different sections on the website. So either by clicking on the blue link at the top will take you to the CropLife South Africa homepage, or the YouTube page, sorry, where you can watch the video there, or you can just watch it on screen in front of you. So it's available at any point in time should you want more clarity about how a certain section on the website does work. Right, and now I'd like to launch a new section called the Weed Species section on Agri-Intel. We've been working on this for a number of years now, and it's finally been launched on the website. So basically, this will be found underneath the label database section, where you can pick it up here in the weed species. You're able to search and in a very similar manner all the other sections on the website where you can search by either an active, a crop, a registration holder, or even a target. And the last step will be selecting the weed species that you'd like to see the products registered on. The report will then show you all the products, all the herbicide products at least, that are registered for that particular weed species. So we're hoping this will be a very valuable tool for the industry. Looking where you can access this, on the left-hand side, you can access it underneath the label database. Or if you're already working in the label database, it'll be in a drop-down menu here where you can make your selection based on any of the starting search options. It works pretty much the same as the rest of the website, where you'll need to make the selections based on your starting point. And there'll also be different optional filters available depending which report type you're choosing. The next step, you'll need to obviously select a further refine by search option. And then the last step will be to select the weed species either in its English common name, its Afrikaans common name, or its Latin name. Depending on the report type that you choose, you can select multiple or individual species, depending on what you're looking for there. And now, once you've made all your selections, you'll just need to click on the Submit button. And as this database is pulling in data from both the label database and our weed species database, you'll often see a grayed out screen with little circles going around. And basically, these reports do take longer to download because it is pulling a mass amount of data from two systems. So please just be patient while it does download. We've tried to work very hard on speeding it up as fast as possible, but at present, this is how it's going to operate for a while. And then looking at the report structure, again, sorry, it's very small on screen, but the principle is basically the same. You're still able to see the active ingredient, the trade name, the registration number, as well as the registration holder of the product. And if we scroll a little bit right in our report, this is where you'll be able to see the link between the different crop species, well, the crop that it's registered on and the weed species itself. And then obviously your English and your Afrikaans common names will be available for you. You'll also be able to see the application stages. So is it applied pre-emergence or post-emergence to either the crop or the weed? So that information is being pulled in from the label database, as well as the application type and how you need to apply it to that specific weed species. And if we're scrolling a little bit more towards the right in the report, there'll be additional comment columns which pertain specifically to that weed species and any restrictions on its level of control or any mixing partners that need to be added to that. You'll also notice some tooltips on these reports. So if you're not sure about the information displayed in that section, a little pop-up will come up just explaining that information to you. Sometimes you'll also notice that there are cells highlighted in red. So we are aware that there are some labels which haven't specifically stated the weed species that it controls. They'll just say it controls most grass weeds or most broadleaf weeds. So in these cases, the system is automatically extrapolating it to all the broadleaf weeds or all the grass weeds. So just bear in mind that when a cell is highlighted in red there, the label has indicated control on most broadleaf or grass or sedge, and it'll be indicated at the top there. And also please note that this section is also aimed to give you a guideline of what you should be using and what is registered, but it's not the ultimate stop in the decision that you're making to apply the product, and that the label obviously can still be downloaded from all of these reports, and the label should always be consulted before application going forward. And data in this section is still currently being populated, and as it being a database, the information does change quite regularly. So please keep checking in with the website to see what is currently available. And that is all from my side. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chana-Lee.
Good.
Congrats on that. I think you guys have worked a lot of years on trying to add that with speed. I know the amount of work that's gone in there. So congratulations on that. We'll take some questions on the floor if they come, but I'll start you off. You know, as someone who uses database quite a lot for my work, and I wanted to ask, how do you ensure that the database content, because you manage, the content, how do you ensure that it's of high quality and up to date for the members that are using it?
So basically, we rely on the information coming from the registration holder. And I think in the last year or two, we've implemented that we need to obtain the stamped label that has been approved by Act 36, so we can compare both the commercial label and the stamped label before we add that information to the website. And we do this on a regular basis. The website is updated basically on a daily basis. So...
When you touch base on the stamp label, brings up my next question, which is, what can industry members do to really make your life a bit more easier or more efficient to make sure that you get this right information in there? And how easy is it to get those stamped labels from the members?
Some members are very giving with the information and some not so much, but we do try to get all the information as early as possible. And obviously it does help if as soon as a product has been registered, that registration holder sends it to us directly so that we can update the information as we go. So we do heavily rely on the feedback from the registration holder.
Okay. Any questions from the floor? We have a question that side. Oh, and one. Okay, so yes, Rod.
Chana-Lee, you mentioned earlier in your talk that we all need to renew our access to Agri-Intel. I haven't noticed that. Is it as from a particular date that's going to happen?
Yes, so 2 weeks before your annual subscription ends, you will be sent an email from the system asking you to renew it in that 2-week period, so that your access will be continued from there.
Thank you. So we'll get a reminder from you.
Yes, you will.
Thank you.
Great.
Pauline, yes.
It's a very powerful tool also in terms of just providing education, specifically on the different labels. Is this something that you think, like an emerging farmer, for an example, just to check if the crop advisor is giving you the right information, you can just empower yourself with this kind of information, specifically because it's products that are registered?
That's correct. I definitely agree. It's available to anyone that wants to access it and wants to have registered information available to them at their fingertips. It might be tricky in some areas where there's no internet access, obviously, but hopefully they can download reports before they go out into the field, per se.
Yes.
Oh, Chana-Lee, I'm impressed. I'm from Zambia, and I'm so jealous of you two. And that's my question. Is this available to the international audience?
Yes, it is. It is available to anyone. There are different pricing modules depending on where the user is based. But being from Zambia, on Agri-Intel, we do only indicate the South African registrations. But if that South African registration has an additional registration elsewhere in one of the SADC countries, then we do indicate that registration number there so you can see if it is registered or not in that country. So it will also help Namibia and Zambia and Botswana and those countries.
Excellent, thank you.
Great.
Right, no other questions. Final question from my side, Chana-Lee. I think as you're aware, we have GHS coming in very soon, which means a lot of changes to the labels.
Yes.
Have you guys thought of an approach, how you're going to approach that? Because it's going to be a huge amount of changes that you're going to need to do to the database. Can you let us know your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we're still waiting for the regulations, obviously, to be published before we do make any changes on the website. But one of the things that we are looking at is including a new column for the GHS label to be updated, because obviously it's going to take us a lot of time to work through both the commercial and the stamped label and the new GHS label to make sure that the new label is correct. But we'll upload the GHS label alongside the commercial label, and hopefully both will be available until everything's been cross-checked.
Okay, no, I think that's good. It's going to be a lot of work. I wish you a lot of luck. But thank you so much for that. I think no other questions from the floor. I think we can move on. Thank you so much for that, Chana-Lee. All right, we'll move on to our third live presentation from Mr. Gerhard Verdoorn, who, whenever I ask him, what do you like to do, Gerrit says, Nomfundo, I hunt and I eat. That's all I do. Over to you, Gerhard.
Good morning, folks. Thank you, Nomfundo, for that kind introduction. And I'm quite serious about if I don't hunt, I don't eat. So it goes hand in hand. And I got the privilege this morning of presenting to you one of our success stories in CropLife SA. And I just want to emphasize the point, it's only one of our little success stories. You heard from Chana, you heard from Elriza, you heard from Rod. We've got lots of success stories. But my job has always been in terms of running or guiding some of the forums. And one of my pet hobbies in CropLife has always been the small pack forum, and Nomfundo herself has been very much involved in that. But before we start off, I think it's time to pay tribute to the grandfather, the father, and even the current driver behind this. That's Bill Smith. He was the first chairman of the small pack working group back in the old days, long before I knew there was something like an FCASA. And over the years, he maintained the chairmanship, and eventually CropLife took over, or FCASA transformed into CropLife SA, and we transformed our working group into forums. And Bill Smith is no longer a chairperson, but he's still on that particular forum with us every single time, still gives valuable input, and he still wraps us over the knuckles now and again when we just go off the straight and narrow. So Bill is online, I hope, this morning. So from all of us in CropLife SA, thank you very much, Bill. You've been a very good mentor. You've been a very good guidance person for all of us. And we hope to see you on our forum for a long, long time. So our forum consists of basically, I'm going to stand over here to see the screen properly. We have about 25 members involved in the small pack forum, which are supply companies. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But we also have the associates like the South African pest control industry that mostly use small pack packaging or small pack pesticide for the pest control operations. We also have the pesticide training academy involved in our small pack forum because, again, they train the pest control operators that buy our small packs. And then, interesting, our timber industry pesticide working group, which is highly focused on the timber sector, they're also very much involved in that because a lot of the timber companies only use the small pack sizes. So it's not a case of small packs which belong basically in the home and garden sector and to the normal consumer market. It's across the board. So amongst these CropLife SA members involved in this are a large number of our supplier members or manufacturers, and we have them on both chairs. There's the chemical side, which involve the synthetic chemicals and natural chemicals, and there's also the biological side. And we could see over the past couple of years how the biological side is gaining momentum and becoming more important. Very nice also is to see that quite a few of our distribution companies have a solid footprint in our small pack forum, and they are here present today, so we have the converter with us today. So thank you very much for all of you participating in the forum because distribution is very important. The other one that we see are industry associations. And we mentioned now, for example, SAPCA and PAKITA, which is the training academy, and the timber industry. But also, there are other groups involved in this. For example, we've got the laboratories. Analytical laboratories service our members, whether at the small pack level or the agricultural level. They're also involved in our group. And then also nice to see now more and more of the consultants that do trials for your companies as supply companies, and also regulatory consultants like Nomfundo herself, a regulatory consultant. They also join the forum to add input and to see where there are opportunities in the market for them to assist our members. So we have a set quarterly forum meeting, and as time progressed, obviously from 2019 up until now, it transformed from contact sessions because of COVID into virtual, and I don't think we're going to go back to total contact again. We might have a hybrid in the future, but the quarterly forums are pretty well attended. And one thing that Bill established in our small pack forum was to set ourselves certain targets. And you can only achieve a target if you have a particular objective and you design a program around that. So every year, at the end of the year, we look at what do we need to do for the next year. And these are the things that we focus on. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So originally, in the back of I think it was 1976, Bill mentioned to me the other day when we had a telephonic discussion about the small pack working group back in the old days. The idea came about that in the old days, in 1947, it was agriculture, agriculture, agriculture. But as the pesticide world developed, obviously there was a need in the consumer market for their own cockroach booties or the Rodenticides and stuff like this. And these were spun off from the agricultural market. but it is very difficult for the consumer to take an agricultural pack or a agricultural label to interpret that and to apply it in a home garden or in a small pack arena. And that was why the small pack working group was established back in those good old days. It was to identify the issues that are particular to the small pack pesticides and to the small pack labels. And out of this then came out these annual projects that were identified and prioritized by the small pack forum to start attacking and to start addressing for the way going forward. But once you've got a particular prioritization of a project or something out there, you must have a strategy on how do you attack that and how to make sure you put the tools into place to make sure it will give you the desired outcome. Now, we all know, most of you know about project management. It's wonderful to run with an idea or a scheme or a project, but if you don't measure it, it means nothing. And I see Elriza smiling because she knows that she measures her media stuff on a day-to-day basis. So we had to also make sure that when we implement a certain mitigation measure for a challenge or we implement a certain project for something we would like to see in the market, we had to have a way to gauge whether we were successful or not. And part of that is, unfortunately, to engage the authorities. Now, I'm not talking about only agriculture department. It might mean health, it might be safety security. And we use the CropLife channel to go through to a particular state department to talk to them about the particular challenge we face in the market and ask them to assist us or to give us the guidance or the tools from a regulatory perspective to be able to achieve the objective. But that can be quite a mission. And we heard it over the last day and a half, how difficult it can be to work with regulatory authorities. But still, we maintain the open communication channels. We are, I think, pretty successful. Sometimes we have to grit our teeth and go back to the drawing board and go back again with a new sort of strategy, but we continue engaging them. So I'm going to go into particular projects that we had in the past and that we closed off and some that we're currently running to show you what were the things that we addressed from the small pack forum size. So Bill told me one of the first things that started coming into the small pack arena was, what about this controversy between a small pack label and the agriculture label? I'm going to take the well-known molecule glyphosate. Okay, so you can have a glyphosate for agricultural application. Now give that to a homeowner and tell him you have to apply 4 liters per hectare. No ways anybody will understand that. And the first objective of the small pack working group in those days was to make sure that the small pack label fits with the small pack consumer, whether a small farmer or a plot owner or a housewife or somebody who's a keen gardener or a home food producer. And that is one of the things that that confused the people in the market, and the objective was then to make the label so that the person who buys a small pack, a 50 ml bottle or up to 1 liter bottle, could easily interpret that label and apply it responsibly. You would have heard the word responsible today time and again, time and again, time and again. One of the big issues that I found when I started running my poison working group in 2003 is that the call rate quickly went from emergencies to advice. And one of the biggest problems that people face, but if you have a small pack label that's now been tailored to suit the small pack consumer, if you say to me as a consumer on that pack, you can use 40 to 80 mils of this delta methrin 2% or a 20%, why is that the sort of wide range of dilution that I have to use or dosage I have to use? And that was absolutely confusing. So we said about 10 years ago to our members, listen, go for the optimal dosage rate and get away from the 40 to 80 or 60 or 20 or whatever you want to do and say, use the optimum one. And all our members, I'm glad to say, did that. And guess what? Nowadays, when I get the calls, there's no confusion about the dose rate. They know if they can find it, believe me, because I hardly ever read the stuff, they know that is the dose rate. 80 mils per liter or 100 mils per liter, whatever it is. So that was, I think, quite a successful attempt on our side to make the labels more tailored towards the small pack consumers. Something we identified, and that also came out around 2007, 2008, is the fact that the normal small pack users, which are mostly urban people, they buy a product, they don't use the stuff responsible, and the kids get it, or the dog get it, or the grandmother gets it, and now there's a poisoning emergency on hand. Who do we phone? Back in the old days, we had 5 functional poison centers in the country. Now we've got the Western Cape, we've got mine, and the others are all defunct. So we identified that there's a problem in the market to say that if a mishap occurs at the small pack level, whether at the farm level or at the consumer level, at the home and garden level, who do they phone up? And we decided then, as a small pack forum, that every label in the country of our member companies should have an emergency number plus a customer care number. And I offered my services to the small pack and said, right, you can use my Griffin Poison Center number as an emergency number, because the value is not only in sorting out the problem right there with the right advice and guiding to the right doctor or the vet or the nurse or the hospital, but also gauging what's happening in the market with misuse, with unlawful use, with unlawful sales and stuff like this. And I'm very happy to say that I think our member companies have now all gone for an emergency number, and they've got a client service number. And it takes a lot of the stress out of the whole society about what happens with an emergency and who would I call to get advice on whether I can use a particular product at a particular dose rate to kill the cockroaches or to control the rats or to control the aphids on my roses. Now, I put there in the brackets, the customer will never be 100% satisfied. It is a difficult beast to work with. And I spent hours and days with them trying to guide them on what to do. They're not always happy, but we try and keep them as happy as possible because it eventually helps them to be responsible, and it helps us as an industry to say we are responsible for our small pack pesticides. Another thing which I identified, that was quite recently, about 4 years ago, what happens when the disaster happens at a depot or a retailer like a Macro, I'm going to use some brand names, a Macro or a Bill's Warehouse or a Plant Park. What happens if that bottle of malathion falls over? What happens if there's a fire? What happens if a pallet of small pack compounds fall over? Who do they call? What do they do? And I realized that many of our member companies did not have emergency plans or disaster management plans. And I think that was a very serious problem for me, because if the paw hits the fan, who takes responsibility? What are the actions to take to make sure it doesn't turn into total cataclysm? And this, again, we discussed at our members and said, right, we have a template in CropLife SA, a disaster management plan template. I gave it to some people. I wrote up the plans for some people. And I'm very glad to report to you that as of today, 50% of our small pack members have fully functional, operational, and tested disaster management plans. I have WhatsApp groups on my cell phone, which belongs to, for example, I'm going to mention Finagro, or a company like Avima, and so on. So if something happens, the message comes through, we activate the team, and we sort the problem out right there before it turns into a cataclysm. Because what Elriza mentioned this morning is the media love to go on to the negative stuff. Okay? And we don't want a little spill or a little fire or a road accident to turn into a disaster which becomes a media hype for the lobby groups out there. So this, I think, we started off. We're not there yet, but we're working hard to get everybody to start working on this. And in the near future, let's say 4 years from now, all our member companies should have properly functional disaster management plan. One of our biggest problems is this flurry of unregistered compounds into the country through Durban Harbour, through the border post at Risana Garcia in Mozambique, through Musina, through the Western Cape ports and stuff like this. It is absolutely a disaster for us. Not because it takes away the market share of the company, because it is stuff that we don't even know what's in the packet. We've had them analyzed. Sometimes they say it contains deltamethrin, it contains DDT, for example, or if it contains acephate instead of what is claimed to be permethrin. And a large volume. If I talk about tens of tons per annum, which we know about, which are confiscated by authorities, I'm not lying to you. And this is a big problem. So what we decided in our small pack forum more than a decade ago, every time we get a report or we see something at a shelf or being sold by a street vendor which is unlawful, we will get a sample, we'll get the sales docket or the invoice, we report it to the inspectorate at Act 36 of 1947. And I must say that the inspectors are quite good on this. They do their best. They confiscate tons. I think 2 years ago in Port Elizabeth, 18 tons of confiscated chemicals were actually destroyed by the department with incineration. So it shows that they try and do their best. Unfortunately, there's still this massive import of unregistered compounds, especially through the Durban Harbour. Now, I've had meetings with SARS and Customs about 6 or 7 years ago to try and get them to come to grips on how do we manage the illegal imports. The bad news, is to give you one anecdote, is that only 4% of containers coming in through the Durban port are checked by authorities for the contents. So if you bring a shipment in, I'm going to mention a country, from Nigeria, which is stocked with sugar, which is totally legitimate, but the half or the back half portion of it is like nearly bundled off, for want of a better word, and that is stocked with illegal pesticides like dichlorphos and acephate and methamidophos. And you don't declare it on your shipping documentation, then the authorities won't know about it. So it comes into harbour, it gets on a ship or a truck, it goes up to Joburg. We know of 2 major warehouses there, and from there they call them the runners. They run around the country with small little vehicles, they get the stuff out as far as Cape Town and Port Elizabeth. So how we get to grips with this, I do not know, because it's at the level of the authorities, which are not properly, I wouldn't say, don't think they're incompetent, but they're not properly geared with enough staff, enough resources, and enough knowledge to be able to clamp down on things. So this is something which is going to be, I think, a lifetime project or a program for our small pack forum. And I'm very happy also to report that all our members report to us on a weekly basis when they pick up these things. We buy them and we try and know them. But I must also tell you that the Agriculture Inspectorate is absolutely hampered by lack of resources. And I work with them closely. They're nice people. They try and work hard. They try and do their best. But if they don't have resources, they don't have vehicles to transport themselves or go and confiscate something from an illegal vendor out there, then we've lost the battle. It doesn't mean we give up. We continue with our program to make sure we clamp down on illegal pesticides. We've also come across a couple of critical safety issues over the past 15 years in the Smallback Forum. I'm going to highlight, I think, 1 or 2 to you. And one of the most important ones was this issue of LDCARB. LDCARB as a street pesticide. LDCARB as a tool of the crime syndicates poisoning dogs all over the country. Now, there's not a single tax rank in the country where you won't find LDCARB. It might be a bit more undercover now because of all the pressure we apply in the market, but it is still sold by many of the street vendors. It's used by crime syndicates, and the number of human mortalities in the country, I'm not going to tell you today because that is going to shock everybody. But the number of dog mortalities per month in the country is about 3,000 to 4,000 dogs per month, which are killed by crime syndicates with LDCARB. And we've tried a lot of things to come to the grips with this particular issue of LDCARB. So we approached the Registrar of Act 36 and we requested him to ban the possession of LDCARB, because by the time the Bayer discontinued LDCARB registration, end of May 2012, the use of LDCARB was prohibited, because if it's not registered anymore, you cannot use it. The problem was in the Act that there wasn't a clause to say that if the product is cancelled, that the possession is also unlawful. So that took us a good 2 years and a good battle with Act 36 to get that promulgated. So now we've got a tool in our hands to say, if I'm found with 1 single sachet of LDCARB, I've automatically contravened the Act. It's not even the case of using it unlawfully, once you have it in your possession. So that was a very valuable tool. And I can tell you, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've used it successfully to prosecute quite a few people that were in possession of LDCARB. What we've also done, and I say we now, I did it on behalf of CropLife, that was 2012, wrote up a whole encyclopedia about LDCARB as a street pesticide and as a tool of criminals, and explained to them what's happening in the country, the ports where they import the stuff illegally, how it comes from Zimbabwe, where the buses coming in with the people every week in South Africa. And I had a meeting scheduled with the Minister of Safety and Security a couple of years ago, and the day before I flew down, they cancelled the meeting. Nothing happened. So from the law enforcement side, from the SAPS that's supposed to look after you and me as normal citizens, nothing happened. We also tried to get ourselves entangled with the Joburg Metro to start a joint operation between CropLife SA, the Joburg Metro, the SAPS, Department of Agriculture, to do joint operations to go out the streets and inform the street vendors about the gravity of having LDCARB in your possession and selling LDCARB to normal people out there, because we know the stuff is so toxic. I'll tell you more about this. So what we also did, we drafted a little briefing document that's available through the WhatsApp system to community policing forums. It explained to them what happens in terms of dog poisons. What is happening with the criminals? How do they search? How do they point out? How do they poison? What do they do afterwards? Because after every dog poison, there's always a Schedule 4 or 5 or 6 crime being committed by the criminals. So this has been going out to our community policing forums all around the country. And I think the success story is now with the regulation which bans the possession, it gives the community policing forums a very strong tool to say, but if I find you on the street with a sachet of LD-Carb, arrest immediately, you go to jail, and you wait there for your court hearing. So that's been a valuable tool. And also the police community forums, and I think there was in Cape Town, in Roodepoort, Johannesburg, and some places in the Eastern Highveld, they were successful in really nabbing the guys that were the kingpins behind LD-Carb syndicates that distributed LD-Carb along with all their runners and so on to the crime syndicates. Our problem is that we don't get any support from the South African police whatsoever. Nothing. I'm not saying the entire police force. There are about 10 officers we work with that give us excellent support. But in the broad scale, when people go to report a dog poison with LD-Carb, the police won't even take a charge from them. They just tell them, if you don't know who poisoned the dogs, we're not going to take a charge from you. So I think we're at our wits' end with the South African police on many levels. And unfortunately, the other thing that also went cold on us was the Joburg Metro. We had a stunning meeting. It was just after Elriza started with CropLife, with a lady, very enthusiastic, but she got no support from the Metro. So that thing also went cold. But again, it doesn't mean we give up. We're going to fight the battle until we see not a single granule of LD-Carb in the country anymore in a couple of years from now. Another issue that we identified that came about in about 2019, when I started getting calls from people wanting to buy a 5-liter container of the 100% dichlorvos or the 90% dichlorvos. That's an agricultural remedy for crops. And I started getting worried when I heard that people want to do home fumigation. Okay? Because the moment you put that concentrate into home, you know all hell is going to break loose. And lo and behold, in 2020 March, a registered pest control operator applied the dichlorvos at a 50 times overdose in the home. And to today, the mother, the father, the young little daughter of about 6 years old now, are still suffering from neurological symptoms because of a misapplication off-label of an agricultural remedy that's a high-value remedy in certain crops. So we found this all over the place with registered PCOs and unregistered PCOs now trying to get their hands on this dichlorvos. And quite a few times, I remember very well, a Zimbabwean national called me that's been a resident for a couple of years, and he bought a 5-liter container of dichlorvos from a vendor in downtown Joburg about 4 years ago, and he was about to fumigate the house, a guest house of all things. I said, whoa, stop the bus right there, because you could have annihilated all your guests in one single go if you did that. That's the gravity of the situation. So what we decided in our small pack forum, it was about April 2020, we sent out a notice to all 3 registration holders, and we told them, please guys, there's an issue. Your labels say it can be used for agriculture and it can be used for domestic use on the outside of the buildings to control certain pests. The problem is there's virtually no reading, or if there's reading, there's only scant reading. They see buildings and they think, oh, indoors. So all 3 companies agreed overnight to remove any domestic application from the labels. They took it off. And the success story is that I don't see any more of the calls coming in from anybody wanting to buy dichlorvos for that particular application. So I think that was a really good thing to protect an agricultural remedy for crops and get it away from people that want to do fumigation of homes. And then our last point here is our Denticide story. I don't want to go into all the stuff because it's a lot of stuff we've been doing. Most of the poisoning cases I get in my poison center call and also Tigerberg are Denticides, poisoning of children and dogs and even adults that accidentally eat the stuff. I don't know, you can make porridge with a little pink granule that contains rodenticide, but that's what people do. People are just very unprofessional and very slack in the approach with rodenticides. So what we propose from our small back working group is that every label of every denticide shall say only to be used in a bait station. Yeah. Secondly, that we designed a poster which will go out into market to tell people about the principles of responsible pesticide or rodenticide use. That we also train the merchandisers, because very often they tell people, oh, but this thing is friendly for owls. Rubbish, there's nothing like this. Or this thing is friendly for dogs. Guess what? Let the dog eat it. I get the call. And I see the vet bills of 70,000 rand for a rodenticide exposure. So these were the issues coming up. And we proposed those particular measures. And I think our companies, all of them, embrace it 100%. And this post you see out there, which Elriza helped us to design with the help of one of our member companies, ProTech, it's now out there. It gives us the basic principles. And very soon it's going to hit the market in all the big stores and see or be in the face of people to understand that this is not a little box of candy. It's a rodenticide with potential harmful effects if you don't apply the stuff according to the label. We've distributed this particular protocol, or our safety poster and a protocol, to the veterinary network via Rural Vet. It's gone out to, I think, over 1,100 vets in Southern Africa, and I do get the call from them talking about how to treat dogs and how to advocate the responsible use of pesticides and rodenticides to their clients. I think the sales force belonging to registration of all the companies have been well educated and well trained. So we've given them a lot of training, and this continues from the companies themselves. So we've got a training module on rodenticide safety. It's been given to the companies. I did the first round for them, and they perpetuate this every year. There's a refresher course. The emergency number on the boxes also helps a lot, because that's when I get the call, and I can tell you 95% of the dog poisonings never result in the mortality of the dog, because when I get the call, we give them the protocol, get the dog to regurgitate, get it off to a vet, and the dogs are safe. So I think that's also quite a success story. The one thing we've been battling was to get the agreement from retailers to put up our poster, but that's now in place. It should start happening by September this year. And we also said that the liquid concentrates, which are only for the PCOs, must only be for PCOs, not on the shelf, not for retailers, not for the consumers. So that is also something which is, I think, about 90% there. Okay, so we're working on that one, and by the end of this year, we should also be 100%. So the problem remains that despite all the efforts of our small pack and working group and all our members, the call rate for dog poisoning with rodenticide is still very high. It can be anything between 3 to 7 calls per day that I handle on my own phone. Okay, and that worries me. It means that the clients out there don't read the labels. And this morning I had 3 calls about poisoning, and I told them that it's because you don't use a bait station. The call rate about infants and children buying these things also quite high. And unfortunately, the unprofessional claims made by salespeople at the retail level are still continuing. But we're going to address that. And I'll be closing off now. I think it's always good to thank people, and I think I would like to thank all our small pack members. It's been wonderful. It's been a fantastic journey, great successes. Thanks Nomfundo for also stepping in when Bill stepped down to be the co-chairperson. Thanks Elriza for getting all our paperwork out and helping with all the posters. Bill, if you hear us in the background, thanks a lot. Been a great father for us. Rod, for your inputs on the small pack forum. Always wonderful to get another opinion and some wise words. And then I would like to thank the inspectors that are not today with us or virtual, but they really helped me a lot. There are about 14 of them. When I call them up, there's always an action happening. Thanks to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerhard, for that feel-good presentation. It's always good to see the success stories as well. I may be a little bit biased because I'm in that working group, but I do recognize the amount of work that the members that are in that working group, really go all out. It's not just about the companies, but it's about the industry. So thank you so much for sharing that. I will go into our questions for you, but I'd like to just take a step back because I just got one question for Chana-Lee, which I think is important, if you guys don't mind. Just one question, and then we'll go into you, Gerrit. All right, Chana-Lee, there's a question that came in from Lawrence, and he was asking, can Agri-Intel also develop a module for biological registered products, or is it currently integrated in the crop protection module system?
Right, so on Agri-Intel, anything that is registered with an L number, we do indicate on the website. So there are biologicals and normal synthetic chemistry as well. But unfortunately, if it hasn't got an L number registration, we won't be adding it. We are looking at adding the M registrations in future, though, to the website once further developments on the website take place.
Perfect. Thank you, Chana-Lee.
Great.
Back to you, Gerhard. We'll open the questions to the floor, but I'll start you off. Thank you so much for giving us such great examples on the success stories. So I will ask you, could you give me an example or two of stories that were not successful? Maybe you've hit some sort of roadblock as a working group. It's something you're still looking at, trying to see how you can take forward, but just one example, one or two examples.
Yeah, I think one of our challenges is this conduit from supplier right into consumer. In the middle of that is the retailer. Okay, all of them, whether the small chains, the large food chains, or a small nursery. And we are of the opinion that there's not enough expertise at that level, and there's not enough understanding of the stewardship principles at that level. And we've been trying our level-based since about 2018 to get them to start buying into our stewardship principles, putting out our bulletins, our billboards, getting them to become trained by CropLife SA by our members. And there's been a very strong opposition from that force. For example, one thing that happened during the COVID lockdown is that they basically canned the principle of having a merchandiser from a company at the retail sales level. Now, those young ladies that you see out there and the young men, they're very well trained. So you ask them a question, they can tell you about my particular Denticide or that company's herbicide or whatever. They've been taken away. Now, the consumer comes there, he stands at the thing at the shelf looking like this, and there's no one to advise him. And I had a bad experience. I'm going to give you one anecdote. In Port Elizabeth, at a particular retailer where a lady walked in, and I stood back and I thought to myself, let me see what happens. You know who they sent to advise her? The door guard. I was horrified about that. So we've been trying a level base to get that responsibility that we've got in our small pack forum right through the value chain to the consumer. But if we don't get the retailer to act responsibly like we want to do, that's a big stumbling block for us. Okay, we had a workshop. You were part of the workshop about 2 weeks ago. We discussed how do we tackle the retail sector. And I could see there was a reluctance from our members because we're scared about the fact if we anger them a bit too much, they will say, but we don't stock your stuff anymore. But we came up with some very good plans, a good strategy. We've dished out the work to individual companies, which is great. In other words, it's not me doing all the work. And we can start working with them. And we rather have an open door with one of the big retailers say, we will engage, we will take your stewardship documentation. We put our billboards at the point of sales and at the shelves. So I think it's something which bothers us greatly. It was a total failure up until about a month or two ago when we heard that they are open to this sort of thing. And what we like about this, people are like a flock of sheep. They mill around until the first one jumped the fence, and they all jump the fence. So by next year this time, we will see our responsible stuff about rodenticides and other pesticides at the retail level.
Thank you, Gerhard. Any questions from the floor? Yes, Hank.
To Gerhard and Elriza, it's not a question, it's a remark and a rather silly one. Maybe you should, as a footnote to your nice poster for rodenticides, say, if you do not use these rodenticides according to the label, just ensure that your veterinarian is not only a vet but also a taxidermist. That way, you'll get your dog back one way or another.
Thank you, Hank. Okay, any other questions? Nothing virtually. Oh, there's one. Yes, Rod.
Sorry, I'm asking too many questions perhaps today.
No, it's okay, Rob. Go ahead.
I've got two questions actually for Gerhard. The first one was where you said, has you come across any roadblocks? And the one that I am aware of, or I'd like to know whether any progress has been made, and that is the registration or the approval of devices that are used for pest control, often in the home or elsewhere, like in glass houses. That's the one question, because I know that you did a lot of work trying to get something approved through the regulator, and I'm not aware that ever that was successful. Second question You mentioned about liquid concentrate denticides, and that these would, or at some time in the future, only be available through PCOs or to PCOs, and not on the shelves and for general merchandise. Question is, how is this going to be achieved? Is this going to be done via the regulator to make it the law that only pesticide control officers would be allowed to buy this stuff? Or would it be done via the manufacturers and distributors all agreeing that this is how they're going to market the product?
Good, thanks for that. Let me answer the second question first. That principle of the liquid rodenticides, which are mostly group 1Bs, it's already ingrained in Act 36, okay? So, and it's also in terms of the Hazardous Substances Act, it has to be locked away. It cannot be sold over the counter. It has to be locked away. It can be sold only when the person who wants to buy it signs a poison register, okay? So I think we've already solved that particular one by looking at what the changes were in Act number 15 and also in Act 36 in terms of what they're allowed to go on the shelf. Okay, there are still a couple of hiccups here and there because retailers might not always abide by this, but I think it's already, in terms of the legislation, it is there. Coming back to the devices story, the question is around, for example, the glue boards used in the HACCP machines that catch all the flies and stuff, and glue ribbons and things like those. I think we've already canned that particular one. We've had some very strong discussion with Act 36, and they demanded that all those things be registered. And despite the fact that the Act does not give them mandate to do it, they wanted to register. Until one day in 2019, when one of the main inspectors stood up in a meeting at Act 36 and said, remember there was a High Court order by the Judge President of the old Transvaal province back in the good old days, okay, that said, you don't have the mandate to register a glue board or a glue device or a device. Don't do that. And Act 36 pulled completely back, and now they do not regulate those things. That's it, finishing clear. And I think that was also something which I wanted to mention, but it was a bit too long for my presentation.
Thank you, Gerhard. No more questions. I know we need to move along. One more question just from the virtual audience, and then we'll move on. A question from Vince. Is there plans for rodent bait stations also coming for the row crop industry? And then he also says, if so, that is a recipe for farmers going off-label. Any thoughts on that?
No, if you look at the labels of rodenticide which are applied in agriculture, not the home and garden sector, they also have the indication there that in the case of, for example, the gerbils, you must either put it into the burrow, seal at the burrow,
Yes.
or use a bait station. It's done, it's dusted, it's on the labels.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gerrit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very informative session. We will move on to our next session, which is a pre-recorded presentation from Brian Kerrin, who is the Agriculture Liability Loss Adjuster. So if we can go through to that presentation, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Kerrin, and what a privilege it is to have been invited to address yourselves on behalf of the crop protection industry on the subject of where does the buck stop? Just as a matter of background, I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in plant pathology and microbiology. I'm a fellow of the South African Institute of Loss Adjusters and a member of the Insurance Institute of South Africa, and for the past 42 years have specialized in agriculture legal liability claims, and which of course includes, and indeed to a large extent, agrochemical or crop protection complaints. As we are well aware, the parties to a pesticide complaint include primarily, number one, the farmer or grower, number two, the agrochemical distributor, and I include the likes of adjuvants, nutritional fertilizers, biological products, plant growth regulators, and defoliants, amongst others. The product registration holder, the product manufacturer and or any toll manufacturer, and then lastly, any supplier of raw ingredients. Unfortunately, there is no easy answer to the question of where does the buck stop, and which perhaps instead ought to be rephrased as to where ought the buck to stop. To start with, Act 36 of 1947 distinctly states that no person, and that includes the farmer, shall in the course of a business, and that includes a farming operation, use any agricultural remedy for a purpose or in a manner other than that specified on the label on a container thereof. Hence placing a very significant onus of good governance or use of a crop protection product on the shoulders of a farmer. We operate in a complex society where basic common law is complicated by the intricacies of control. And for this reason, a farmer's usual and simplest line of recourse in the event of a complaint of either injury or damage to a crop, or the failure of a product to perform, which we call inefficacy or non-performance, being against the distributor or agent who recommended and sold, or merely sold, a pesticide product to the farmer, and which might include the likes of a cooperative type retailer or an off-the-shelf item. In any legal proceedings, that distributor is invariably said to have represented themselves to the public in general and in particular to the plaintiff, in this instance the farmer, as expert suppliers of and advisors in respect of agricultural chemicals, and having entered into a contract, whether in writing or verbally with the farmer, to amongst others take due care, to at all times act professionally and with the skill and knowledge to be expected of an expert, to at all times act without negligence, and to be accountable, diligent, and meticulous in the provision of its services, to provide expert advice in respect of all matters incidental and ancillary to the acquisition, supply, and administration of agricultural chemicals to the plaintiff or farmer's crop, established or still to be established, to periodically visit the farm to inspect the crop and to recommend appropriate applications, be it preventative or curative. And so the list goes on. Legal jargon as phrased in a recent action, but just an indication of how significant and important is the contractual relationship between farmer and distributor, and as the farmer's first line of recourse. In any legal proceedings, the onus of the farmer to demonstrate that a breach of contract has occurred and that the product or tank mix combination of partner products caused injury or was inefficient, and which was not as a result of any wrongdoing on the farmer's part, and such leading to financial damages and which had not been within the contemplation of the terms and spirit of the contract entered into, either directly or even implied. In other words, the complainant would need not only to allege, but to demonstrate and prove that the defendant breached one or more of the contractual obligations which it owed to the claimant farmer under the contracts which it concluded with them, written or verbal, by way of advice or the omission of advice, and that such breach was the cause of the losses which they suffered and the compensation remedy which they seek. The onus would then rest with the distributor or agent to show that the damage was a result of causes unrelated to the advice afforded or of the quality of the product supplied, and in the process raising reasonable and feasible alternative causation possibilities, and or that any product limitations are clearly indicated on the label of the product, and which is required in terms of Act 36 of 1947 to be attached to every container of product supplied, and readily accessible to the farmer to read and to acquaint himself with the directions of use, restrictions, and the like. A distributor may in turn raise as a defense an allegation that despite the advice having been erroneous and or a product having been defective, the terms and conditions of the written contract are so worded that as a distributor, it cannot be held legally liable for the consequences thereof. The question then is one of morality, and is it fair and reasonable for a distributor or registration holder to opt out of a liability which may otherwise have existed had it not been for the onerous wording of the written contract, something that every distributor requires to closely look into, as also so do the manufacturers and registration holders of pesticides. It may well be that a manufacturer or registration holder, or for that matter, a distributor or toll manufacturer, in its relationship with its respective customer, agrees to waive such terms and conditions which are harsh and unreasonable, and under the circumstances prevailing. However, the same may not necessarily apply to all insurers, certain of whom on legal advice would argue that the policy issued is one which covers the policy holder or client's legal liability alone, and that if there is a valid defense on the basis of contractual terms and conditions, and which would stand up in a court of law, then there cannot be said to be a legal liability in terms of the policy issued, and on the basis of which such claim might then well be declined. It is also the registration holder's responsibility to ensure that the label, which provides written instructions for achieving the desired level of, for instance, weed, disease, or pest management, and which by law is required to accompany each product container, is so worded such as to adequately impart to the agrochemical advisor and the user the relevant detail of the risks and precautions to be taken in the use of said product, including the compatibility of the product with tank mix partners, not only in the sense of tank mixability, but also insofar as final outcome on the crop is concerned. Of course, in view of the staggering permutations due to the ever-increasing number of products on the market, such becomes a virtual impossibility, and hence normally only providing detail of those products which are compatible and warning the user and its advisor to ensure that they are satisfied that the combination of which they tank mix are indeed compatible, and that some or other synergistic or antagonistic reaction will not occur under a certain set of circumstances. In other words, placing a significant onus of care on the distributor to ensure that such combinations are safe, either by way of its own trial work or by inquiry of the registration holder of each of the products in that tank mix. The label then will become a legal benchmark by which the actions of the user and advised dispensed or recommended by the distributor or agent to the end user will be compared to the expected standards of conduct as outlined by the label. Use of an agrochemical contrary to its label directions and precautions may then establish a potential liability. Of course, in any legal proceedings, that label will be very closely scrutinized to establish whether said label is indeed sufficiently inclusive insofar as advising the user, albeit via a distributor, of all of the risks which could or should reasonably have been foreseen connected to that product's use. And to the extent that it is common in legal proceedings for legal teams to scrutinize the labels of similar products marketed, for instance, in the USA, Australia, and others, to establish the warnings and directions and precautions as are included therein. Insofar as legal recourse by a farmer under South African law is concerned, and as earlier mentioned, is that of the contractual action. As an alternative, and normally a more complicated action, and more difficult to show, is that of an intellectual action, and where the claimant or plaintiff would need to demonstrate that the supplier or registration holder or toll manufacturer, etc., had been negligent and ought reasonably to have foreseen that its actions, or for that matter omissions, lack of warnings on its labels, verbal advice afforded to a distributor, farmer or the like, might eventuate in injury or non-performance or the like. Delictual actions are complicated, with at least 5 requirements being necessary for such action to succeed, but which action also allows for contributory negligence on the part of several parties and an apportionment of damages allocated dependent on the adjudicated degree of blame, which as far as I am aware is currently not catered for under the law of contract. Of course, under the law of contract, a distributor who may not have been the wrongdoer, although it may be liable in the first instance, is able to join, for example, the registration holder, the party with whom it in turn has contracted in the action, or to institute a separate contractual action against that party, and the onus then being on said distributor to demonstrate a breach of contract and why said party ought to be responsible and liable. Finally, a consumer may potentially also have a statutory recourse against a wrongdoer in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, Section 61, items 1 and 2 of which are worded as follows. Liability for damage caused by goods. Number 61, number 1. Except to the extent contemplated in subsection 4, the producer or importer, distributor or retailer of any goods is liable for any harm as described in subsection 5, caused wholly or partly as a consequence of number A, supplying any unsafe goods, B, a product failure, defect or hazard in any goods, or number C, inadequate instructions or warnings provided to the consumer pertaining to any hazard arising from or associated with the use of any goods, irrespective of whether the harm resulted from any negligence on the part of the producer, importer, distributor, or retailer, as the case may be. And number 2, a supplier of services who, in conjunction with the performance of those services, applies, supplies, installs, or provides access to any goods, must be regarded as a supplier of those goods to the consumer for the purposes of this section. There are, in terms of the Act, a list of areas where liability would apply, or at least limitations in respect thereof, and on which I am not qualified to provide input. And my experience being that the normal legal route opted for is that of an contractual action and or a delictual action, or both, and where several parties, including agent, distributor, registration holder, and the like, may be joined in the action as first, second, third defendants, third parties, etc. In conclusion, the topic of where does the buck stop is a complex one and very much dependent on the facts of the complaint to hand, and including the terms and conditions, both written and verbal thereof. My advice to the industry is that the distributors or agents or agrochemical advisors required to ensure that they stringently comply with the provisions and requirements of 86 of 1947, insofar as the advice which they dispense to their farmer clientele is concerned, and which very importantly extends to the tank mix partner products which are applied in combination, and that such recommendations are only made following careful reading of the label, double-check inquiry of the registration holder, and obtain their advice in writing, inquiry via knowledgeable colleagues and respected technical advisors in the industry, and the like. Finally, distributors and registration holders, toll formulators and the like need to reflect hard and deep on the wording of their terms and conditions of trade and the reasonableness, morally and from an integrity window, of contractually opting out of or limiting their liability, where at common law they would otherwise and should have been liable. Trusting that my input will be useful to an industry with which I have been so closely partnered for my entire working life. Just thank you to CropLife for inviting me to give this presentation today. And should there be any further inquiries as to the subject matter of this course, you're welcome to contact me, Brian Kerrin, at the details given on the next slide. And the floor will now be open to any questions which you may have.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Brian, for that very informative and interesting presentation. Welcome to the panel. All right, and then what I'll be doing, before we go into the questions, just a little bit of housekeeping. A cell phone, if anybody's missing a cell phone in the men's bathroom, please see me. Just hold that. Thank you. Cell phone, perfect. All right, to kick us off, Brian, I will open the questions to the floor and to the virtual audience. But just to kick us off, you posed a question of morality to all distributors and registration holders. And I will state this. You said, is it fair and reasonable for a distributor or registration holder to opt out of a liability which may otherwise have existed had it not been for the onerous wording of the written contract? You then proceeded to request that all distributors and registration holders look into this moral dilemma very, very closely. I really would like to open up this question to the floor to sort of say, colleagues, is it fair and reasonable to be able to do that? As Brian has put it in his presentation. Any thoughts from you guys? It's a debate. It's a very tough question, but that's why we are here today, to really think outside and debate about it. Is it fair and reasonable? Anybody willing to be brave enough to? Yes.
Can I come back now? Is it Nomfundo?
Yes, it is, Brian.
Thank you. Good. Sorry, I have a very bad internet line here at the moment, so I hope you can hear me. Yes, is a tough question, but it's one that I believe that the industry needs to look at. And fingers are certainly not being pointed at any one company. However, right at the moment, we are dealing with cases where exactly what I have posed is the case, and where there ought to be liability, but terms and conditions are raised as a difference. And over the years, this has been the case. And fairly, attorneys will raise as a defense and as a disclaimer any terms and conditions that they can, which opt out of a liability, because there is not a liability if those terms and conditions have been accepted and agreed to by the parties in a contractual relationship.
Thank you, Brian. We have a comment on the floor.
Matthews
you,
from Granny SA. The question is it fair that a distributor or advisor then opts out of a liability? No, it's not fair. It's not fair. I'll tell you why. This is my 39th crop that I'll be harvesting now in my career. It was only last year during a meeting between CropLife and Grain SA that I got to realize that if an advisor gives me advice that's off-label, it's actually illegal. In 39 years, I didn't know that.
Sure.
The advice I was given that was off-label was always from a perspective of not having recourse to the company. Nobody ever told me it's illegal to apply product off-label. So it cannot be fair that they opt out of a liability. It's impossible.
Thank you, Derek. Okay.
Hence the subject matter of my talk.
Gerhard, I think you would like to comment.
I tend to agree with Derek on the fairness of the issue, but I want to address another point, and that comes back to the base of the whole industry. This Consumer Protection Act, to me, is a very dangerous thing. It's moving towards what's happening, or what's happened always in the USA, where you can sue anybody for anything if you're an idiot. Now, if we have the principle in Act 36 that we have a label, the supplier, distributor, salesperson, and the farmer or the consumer has to abide by the label, and yet if he or she doesn't abide by the label and they kill their dog, they come and claim against a company. That to me is a very serious dilemma we're faced with, and I see it sometimes coming to me from the consumers complaining about making a mistake. they poison the dogs by applying a methanol flybait. Now they want to sue the company, want to sue me because my number is on there as an emergency number. So we have to think about this in the agrochemical sector because it's going to bite us sometimes if you get the wrong auntie at the wrong day talking to the Consumer Protection Council. I'm just flagging this up as an important issue. Okay, so in other words, Derek can decide, despite the 100% advice, using a particular glyphosate on a GM maize crop according to label, he decides to go off label, he damages the crop, and he comes and he claims against the company. So that principle is something which I'm concerned about.
Thank you, Gerhard. I think touching base on the Protection Act, when I saw it as well, that scared me a little bit, I'll be honest. And it poses a question to you, Brian, where we have the law, which is the Consumer Protection Act, but then you have the contractual. Brian is gone. Okay. All right, no, that's fine. I think Brian is gone, so if there's any other questions, please send them virtually, and then we will pass them on to him. Yes, Chris.
Thanks, Nomfundo. I think we all accept that the crop advisor is first in line. He's the guy on the farm. He's got the relationship with the farmer. He's made the recommendation generally. Mm-hmm. But Derek, I have to throw it back to you. I don't know if you're still there. That very often the farmer puts our crop advisors into a position where they are almost forced to make an unregistered recommendation. They can't get into the fields because their fields are too wet, and we have to spray by air with products that are not necessarily registered out of the air. Or they don't have enough equipment to spray everything in time, and the weed stage is past the ideal spraying time. So I'd just like to make the point that it's a little unfair, I think, always to point fingers at the crop advisor. There are other role players who make their life difficult for these guys to always abide by the rules.
Thank you, Chris. Any other? Yes, another comment there.
Thank you. In general, as well, there's a number of reasons why a claim can arise. One is obviously incorrect use of the chemicals on farm. Secondly is the advice. But thirdly, there can also be product defects. Yes. So in general, I think if there's somebody at fault from a contractual point of view, to stand out of the water is not ethical. And I think that's something that we as an industry have to look at to say, if there is a real reason, then you have to take the responsibility. I think that's part of stewardship. And I hear what Gerhard says, and I fully agree with him. But there are instances where contractually businesses or companies stand out of the water, which is not right.
Thank you. No other one? I think we can wrap that up because we had more questions for Derek. Oh, there is one. Marius, excuse me.
No problem. I just want to add to that, really from a suppliers and registration holders point of view, there's two things that's guaranteed. The one is that label and the drum or the product that it's on, that's the same thing. So you guarantee the quality of the product is really what's registered there. The second part is if you use it according to the label and you don't have the expected outcome. And I think those are the two careful things that one has to look at when you look at a case like that. The reality is these certain practices, like Chris rightfully said, you can't get into the lands, or you can't spray, or when it's not an aerial application, or you miss an opportunity, or the weeds are too long, and there might be many reasons. I think there's, within the context of a lot of the chemical products, there's a large opportunity for error. And it's because it's been developed under quite a lot of different conditions. So I'll give you some examples. Some herbicides in the central parts of the Free State are not registered there simply because of cold frost, which happens every now and then. So every now and then there's a complaint because there's been an applied acceptance of a certain use that started happening over time. And the reality is everyone is responsible. The buck stops with everyone. If you go to court, the court will tell the supplier, well, you've known about this, why didn't you do anything about it? The lawyer usually, or everyone reads that label in depth just before the court case. And I think these are, I just want to make that statement. Everyone in the chain is responsible for this.
Agreed. Thank you, Marius. No other questions on the floor. We have some comments virtually. The first one coming in from Graham Harding. What Gerhard is saying is that there is a moral responsibility on all parties, in capital on all, all parties. Another comment from Andre Brooksma. Unfortunately, distributors of biostimulants, group 3 fertilizers, easily recommends their products with all insecticides and fungicides, etc., without testing the effect such mixtures may have on the crop in terms of damage to the crop or on the uptake of the AgChem product. If there is a problem, the butch always ends up with the AgChem product. It should become a requirement and guidelines to submit compatibility data for such claims to be made, and not only jar tests, but actual field trials. That's from Andre Brooksma. Thank you. All right, I'm sorry we lost Derek. I think we had quite a few questions for him. It was going to be really an interesting debate. Sorry, Brian, apologies. An interesting debate, especially with the Consumer Protection Act, because when we look at that, you can see it's going to be a lot for us as manufacturers. All right, so thank you so much to Brian. So let's move on to our last presentation, definitely not the least. We're moving on to Gerrit, who's going to be taking us through responsible journalism. It's a pre-recorded presentation. No, it's live. Oh, thank you. Okay, live. So they wrote pre-recorded. Thank you, Gerrit.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'm Gerrit Bezuidenhout, Landbouweekblad journalist and a Landbouweekliks presenter, of course. Now, you know, this is the last presentation just before lunch, and I think I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I could really do with a long, drawn-out discussion on ethical journalism as it pertains to the agricultural industry. Well, if that's your thoughts, I've got bad news for you. And then secondly, you'll hear that I use the word we when I'm talking. This is, of course, the royal we, and is not just to anyone specific. So disclaimer, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm talking about everything in general. So, how many of you have recommended a product or a service to a customer without the product or that service being tested first? Imagine arriving on a farm. You're fully prepared and you're armed with a solid foundation of Facebook hearsay and Twitter feeds and Instagram pictures, ready to advise your client on a potentially season-ruining problem. It will be a memorable visit, won't it? And yet, that is how we go around with the distribution and generation of content on media. I mean, I often receive messages and pictures on WhatsApp from my mother. And they usually will be something outrageous, a tsunami on the Vaal Dam. And then I'll send her a message back. I'll say, hey, Mom, pretty interesting picture. Where did it come from? And my mom will say, I don't know. And I'll be like, cool. And then I'll send on the picture. No, not really, I won't send on that picture. But how often have we sent around an image or a message that we can't really verify just because it fits the narrative? Now, we hear a vast amount of grumbling every day about the big faceless media, you know, that big thing that's owned by Deep State or the New World Order. I also don't know who the hell they are, but we see that all the time. Now, that is that machine which churns out propaganda and fake news and trickery, which is designed to bring us all to ruin and bring about the end of civilization. Now, while it is undeniable that some outlets do have an agenda, just as there are bad apples in all industries, the good news is that the majority of media outlets aim to be unbiased and ethical in their reporting. Our perception, of course, also colors how we perceive this news. Now, a little bit more about that later. For now, I'd like to move the spotlight a little bit and shine it into a mirror. You see, when it comes to pointing the finger at big media, I would be, like we used to say on the playground, careful that 3 little fingers aren't just pointing back at me. You see, the moment we use any social media platform, we become the media. We become the guy with the information that others would like to hear. Now, every day we share little bits and pieces of our lives with people and family and friends all around the world. How much did it snow in Sutherland? How much did it rain on your farm? I saw you went on holiday, and how big is that fish that you had caught? But now we move on to the bigger issues. How careful do I have to be of your products when it comes to my health or that of my workers? How do I know that the product that I'm putting on my fields is going to be effective and is not just a money spinner? Are you giving me the advice an impartial source would give me, or are you maybe succumbing to corporate pressure or the promise of a bigger paycheck? You see, we tend to forget that just like any reporter, we have all become information gatherers and suppliers. If this were the 30s, we'd all go Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall and wear trench coats and fedoras with press stuck in the headband. And we do not want to admit that what we tend to pass on, especially on social media, are half-truths, untested theories, and sometimes, because we are all a little biased, bald-faced lies. And this is why it is so important to test our source. There is a great saying in agriculture, garbage in, garbage out. If you put garbage products in your fields, well, your yield will be garbage. If you collect garbage data on your planting or spraying or harvesting, your information picture on your sustainability of your farm, well, that will be garbage. And if you tend to draw the news and stories you share from garbage sources, well, there you go. Remember, people will share what you have to say, they know who you are, and if you share garbage, well, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. And once it catches up to you, the loss of reputation, clients and friends, it's just not worth it. So test everything like you would test everything in your daily lives. If you want to buy a new car, take it for a test ride. If you want to buy a house, well, you go and check it out. If you're looking for a spouse, you know what, I'll leave that up to you. But if you want to be the person that is known for their honesty, their integrity, and their truthful reporting, test your sources before sharing anything. You see, we all have a responsibility when we share news with the world, with a greater community out there. By sharing information, as I've said, we become the faceless media. But I'm not faceless. You say to me, people buy my products, they see me in church, they talk to me at the co-op. You see, that's where it becomes dangerous. Because now the faceless media, it has a face. Ours. Remember that if you share an opinion or a message, and especially if it is a popular one, it will go like a rocket, at the speed of light. So Terry Pratchett, the author, once wrote, "A lie can run around the world before the truth has got its boots on." Isn't that the truth? Also know that the rise of social media gave all of us an exposure to an audience that is diverse and varied. So ask yourself, how would people interpret my message? Remember, your voice and your face gives an inflection and meaning to your message. This is not possible in digital or on paper. And a video is very short, so it doesn't give that context of your message. This may mean that your message could become twisted, which can lead to reputational damage. So what are we supposed to do, you ask, if it's really that serious? Now, there are 3 simple rules that I use in my own reporting. These are: be truthful, be accurate, and be impartial. Now, there are hundreds of other factors I can add, but we don't have the time for them all. So I'm just going to focus on these 3. Now, about being truthful. We all embellish in one way or the other, because humans are in their core storytellers. We love stories, especially the ones where we feature, where we take center stage. And this is especially true in our everyday lives. We like to make our own point of view because our point of view matters. So in the case where your audience is small and intimate, that they know you and is also not recording your message, I say go for it. Quintessentially, every man or woman are their own greatest hero. So if the fish weighs 1.5 kilograms and you're standing around at a braai telling people that you caught it, add those couple of kilograms. It's not going to hurt anyone. However, when we start addressing the world at large about serious issues, we have to keep it truthful right down to the parts where it hurt. We should be able to stand up, look the world in the eye, and tell them if a project or a product has not performed as well as it has, or as it should have. Be honest about these things, and you won't have to duck into the very first boereworsrol stand at Nampo to avoid an irate farmer. But we should also have an answer or an alternative when we do encounter a challenge like this. Only a fool or someone of incredible faith walks into the lion's den armed with only good intentions, eh? If there is an issue, apologize. Fix it. And you know what? Then report on the success of the solution. It is your win, and you should tell people about it. This is also how journalists should operate. Always truthful. I cannot bring your company's message to my reader or to my viewer if I doubt the truthfulness or the veracity of the message. And do not lie to a journalist either. Both of our reputations, the messenger and the journalist, both of our reputations are on the line. And if we are untruthful, we'll both be dragged into a pit of iniquity once the truth comes out. Remember, when the proverbial fecal matter hits the proverbial fan, we all end up spotty. So speaking of the truth, and this is where accuracy comes in. It's a funny old thing, isn't it? Truth. It can be twisted. It can be molded to suit any situation. And there are smart people out there who get paid the big bucks to do just that. I can tell you, each and every one of them find themselves at one time or another questioning themselves and crying. Crying into their $500 martini or on their billion-dollar yacht or into the sunset, their vineyard in Provence, asking themselves if it was worth it. Now, if you do not care for your customers or the environment or your children's futures, I suspect that the storm of tears will be short-lived. But for the rest, it's excruciating. And they usually burn out within a short couple of years, cynical and soulless, but wealthy enough that their children do not have to work and can instead enjoy years and years of climate change, scarcity of resources, and seeing the emergence of new and exciting pests and plagues. So in short, do not bend the truth. Be accurate. Report exactly what is in front of you. Because riding the tiger only means you'll be feeling the teeth when you have grown too old and weak to fight it off. Lastly comes the point of impartiality, and it's quite a big one. None of us, not a single one of us here and out there, completely unbiased. Now, Koos Kombuis, the Afrikaans singer and the author, put it so nicely when he referred to people as reservoirs, filled with our experiences and our picked up knowledge, our inbred instincts and prejudices, which are engendered by that. Mostly, especially in a professional setting, we can contain the reservoir, and our walls are thick and strong, keeping our personal bias separate from our work life. But sometimes, life experiences start gnawing away at these walls. Bits and parts give way, and then we bleed our bias into the river of social media, or even worse, into paid media. Now, this can never happen to a journalist, and it should not happen to you guys if you are creating content beyond your inner circle of friends and family. It is one thing to shape thoughts and opinions after extensive reading up on the subject, studying it, discussing it with proven sources who have a wider knowledge on it. It's a completely different animal to enforce an untried theory, which is basically a lie dressed up in its Sunday best and with a solid splash of eau de BS on others. The values we as journalists should instill in our own work, and which you as an industry should instill in yours, comes down to the same things we got taught as children, and which we hopefully teach our children. The first, we do not lie, we tell the truth. Secondly, we do not cheat, we play fair with our other children. And lastly, we do not let Timmy from down the road influence us to do bad things, because then we'll get hurt. That, in essence, is ethical journalism. To pursue truthful reporting, accurate, unbiased, and grounded in solid, proven fact. It's been a pleasure sharing some of my thoughts with you today. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gerrit, for that insightful presentation. I learned a lot and I enjoyed that. To start us off, you just quoted something. You said, we do not lie, we tell the truth. We do not cheat, we play fair with other children. And that hit me, and it makes me want to ask, is that how you describe ethical journalism
That is
currently in South Africa right now?
Oh.
Just to add.
Nomfundo, what a question. You would also remember that earlier in my presentation I said that there are some bad apples. It's just like in any other parts of the industry. I think in general, on the professional and non-pony newspaper side of things, I'm definitely not going to name names, but you definitely have more professional journalists. I think it was one of the previous sessions that we were talking about pricing and how if the price is too high, you get shaken out of the market. If you lie some more as a journalist, you'll get shaken out of the market. And that is the important thing. So yes, there are some issues, especially with popular media, but I can say with absolute oortuiging that when it comes to conviction, thank you very much, absolute conviction that when it comes to agricultural journalism, I think truthfulness, accuracy, and impartiality is something we all strive very, very hard to do.
I'm glad to hear it. I'll open up questions to the floor. Any questions? No? Oh, yes.
Gerrit, are there segments or parts of agriculture that you're seeing it's really difficult to apply these three principles, or where people find difficulty in applying these? Maybe for lack of knowledge, I don't know, but where they could be prone to not be straightforward.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it comes down to both sides of or both parties maybe lacking a bit of knowledge. On the one hand, if I think, and I'm not targeting the crop protection industry, if I look at the crop protection industry, there are a lot of abbreviations and terms and technical jargon that gets used, and I mean it's the industry's language, isn't it? If I listen to things like PCSs and VODs, and I mean it's Greek to me. So I think the onus rests on me as a journalist to come and ask you exactly what that means, in order to bring the right and the true message to my reader or my viewer. At the same time, I think the responsibility is also on the industry to make sure that the journalist understands the message fully. And that is why I'm very much a proponent and a supporter of collaboration. We've been talking about collaboration the past 2 days, over and over and over. It's not a me versus you or a us versus them. It's always collaboration. So when we are dealing with the media, and I know it's difficult if it's a hostile media, that's also, try and find that golden midway. Find that collaboration. Because at the end of the day, it's your message that goes out into the world. So make sure that what goes out is exactly what you wanted to be said. So that's how I see it.
Thank you, Gerrit. Any other questions? Yes, Elriza.
On that, Gerrit, we touched on in my session the hostile media, right? So perhaps maybe some advice from your part. If you do find yourself in a position where you can clearly see you are on the receiving end of a pre-established agenda, right? What do you do? What would you recommend? How do we approach it?
You know what, Elriza? Bribery works. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. we were saying, it's very difficult to not take things personally when it comes to this. And the moment that you see that there's a hostile agenda from the person asking the questions, address it. I'd say address it immediately. Not in a hostile way yourself. I mean, don't throw chairs and stuff, but say, I'm getting the feed. I love the way that I don't actually like it. It actually drives me up the wall, but it works so well when you say stuff like, I feel like. Yes. Immediately you disarm that person, because anything that they say contrary after that just makes them look like a fool. So just say, I feel like there might be a bit of a prefabricated agenda here. You've come in with a notion beforehand, but let me show you what the real story is. Let me tell you the truth about this. All friendly, all happy, all smiley. And then you give them your message. But make sure that the story that they leave with out that door is the exact message that you want to give. There can't be any gray areas when you're talking to a journalist with that background, or to an agricultural journalist for that matter. So make sure that the message is very clear, very clear from your side.
Thanks. That certainly is excellent advice. Thank you. As a spin-off, providing I did all that. I didn't, but in an instance, say I do all these things and I really put that effort in and I walk away and I'm going, yes, I won. And they don't use any of the information and they still go ahead. And other than not taking it personally, what should we then do?
Then you talk to the editor of the publication.
So you would recommend
that?
Yeah.
I wouldn't go so far as to say, right, this person has maliciously damaged the reputation of my company, etc., ombudsman now. Yeah. I wouldn't do that. I would go and have a meeting with the journalist and with the editor and say to them, all right, this is the situation. This is what I said. And this is why you have to be very clear about your message, right? And I have to make sure that the journalist is absolutely knows what you said to them, right? So that afterwards, if there is a problem, you can say, all right, this was the message. I know that I gave the message to the journalist, but this is what came out on the other side. So now it comes back to that part of apologizing, fixing it, and then broadcasting. Nee? That is what you do. You have a meeting with the journalist, his editor, or her editor, and you fix the problem.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerrit.
Thank you, Nomfundo.
Yes, definitely.
Just, I guess, a couple of comments again rather than questions. The point is that generally sensationalism sells. So choose your media carefully. If you're going to be reading things, read quality publications. I think that's probably as a defense for us reading or consuming the media is probably the best thing to do. And then secondly, what I wanted to just say to, well, there were a couple of comments from I think two people who said that they take things quite personally in CropLife. I think that's a good thing, because actually that means that you care about the organization and you care about the industry. And so I see that actually as a positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think just to finalize the session, Gerrit, your presentation referred to ethical reporting. You indicated 3 pillars: be truthful, be accurate, be impartial. Now, do you think journalists follow these 3 pillars when it comes to topics such as pesticide usage and the effect it has on consumers? Your thoughts on that?
Straight up, they damn well should. I mean, that is, if you're going to be reporting on pesticides and you know what, I don't really like the word pesticide so much. I like crop protection. It sounds softer. But you should really put the truth out there. If something is harmful, say it. Because if you wrap it in cotton wool and something happens, yes, I would feel terrible. If I wrote something and I said, it's not that, it's okay, and something happened. So be absolutely truthful. Be accurate. If you're going to report on a product, make sure that you at least spell the active correctly, you know. And then lastly, be impartial. You as a journalist might not agree with using chemical crop protection products. You might be more into biologicals, which is fine. But don't let that color your reporting at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really like that. Just to finally, thank you so much to the panelists. I really, really appreciated your presentations. They're really insightful. Thank you, Elriza, for all you do for CropLife with the new courses. Thank you, Chana-Lee, on the Agri-Intel. We love it. And Gerhard, thank you on the successful stories. And of course, Brian, who's not here. But thank you so much on that. Thank you very much, Gerrit. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much to the floor and the audience. We've had a great session. And enjoy your lunch. Thank you.